recorded session. My name is Claire Sullivan. I work for Barnardo's, and I have been asked to deliver a 1-hour workshop on child sexual abuse and harmful sexual behaviour, specifically for the North Yorkshire wider workforce. So it's everybody's responsibility to keep our children safe, and this is a reminder of that. But more specifically, we're focusing on the topics of child sexual abuse and harmful sexual behaviour. North Yorkshire have recently, the Safeguarding Board have recently developed an HSB toolkit, and this will be an integral part of that upskilling of everybody's kind of curiosity, knowledge, and confidence in having conversations with children and colleagues about observations, concerns, and hopefully I'm going to introduce you to some resources and some support for the work that you do to keep our children safe. So like I said, I work for Barnardo's. I'm the therapeutic team manager there, and I manage a team of therapists who are part of a service that's been was established 30 years ago in response to the Cleveland Child Abuse Inquiry. And we work with children and families who have been affected by child sexual abuse and have been affected by harmful sexual behaviour. My email address is on the slide there. Our office number is 01642 300 774. And I really do want everybody that sees this this workshop to feel that they can give us a call and make an inquiry if you have a certain family or child that you're working with and you would like some advice, some consultation, you'd like to talk through a referral. I'd welcome your call. So as you're watching this workshop, people who work with children and families, work in child protection, we can sometimes kind of feel like it's our bread and butter and we forget to look after ourselves. The benefit of having a recorded session is that you can pause it. You can go and get yourself a drink. You can put the heating on or open the window if you're watching it in the summer, take a short break outside. But what I really want you to remember is that you are looking at a specific topic through a very small window. And when we focus on things like sexual abuse and harmful sexual behaviour, it can trigger us in ways that we're not expecting. Just because this is the work that I do every day of every week doesn't mean that it doesn't affect me. So we all have to take notice of when we're full and we need to step away. So even if your phone call to us is to inquire about how to manage with a case and the impact it's having on you, we would welcome your call. So please look after yourselves while you're watching this workshop. Okay, so a little bit about the service that we have. We're based in Middlesbrough. We primarily serve the North East, so across the Tees Valley and neighbouring local authorities. But we're flexible and creative enough to be able to work with children who potentially are transient and travelling to the other end of the country and still need our support. So we often have inquiries from different parts of the UK, in Barnardo's, outside of Barnardo's, to support colleagues with those curious conversations, with those observations that perhaps are concerning them. So here what we do is our work is funded in packages of 12 sessions for healing. So healing interventions are for children who have been affected by sexual abuse. We work with children who are from the age of about 3 up to their 19th birthday. And I say about 3 because we've recently had some inquiries for children younger than 3 who have been able to display to safe adults that something has happened to them. We do not rely on a verbal disclosure here at Barnardo's, and I'll talk more about that as we go through the recording. So we deliver our 12 healing sessions, and if children need more, then we would apply for further sessions. Those healing sessions, if a child has a social worker, they can be referred by social care. If a child doesn't have a social worker, then the family can go to the GP and ask for a GP referral and health fund those packages. And I have resources to support parents in having those conversations with GPs, because sometimes it's just finding the words. You know, it's hard enough for anybody to talk about sexual abuse or disclose sexual abuse, but then actually asking for help can sometimes be a barrier as well. So we would support that with parents. We offer 24 therapeutic and psychoeducative sessions for children who have displayed harmful sexual behaviour. The reason that's a bigger package is because there are some direct elements to that package, and I would probably split it into 3 core parts. The first part being the relationship building, the sense of responsibility for what has happened, the motivation to change. That's all worked upon in that first part. And without a good relationship, no change will happen. They say that 97% of therapy is about the relationship. So we really work hard to build that. The psychoeducative sessions are tailored to meet the needs of the child who has displayed harmful sexual behaviour, and they can cover things like consent and the law. They can cover specific incidents pertaining to the child's experience. What we would also do is finish that piece of work with a final core element, which is based on the Good Lives model. I'll talk a bit more about that as we go through the session, but it's really very much solution focused, looking for a new normal that's safe and healthy. Every behaviour meets a need, so we look at what the harmful sexual behaviour met and look at how to meet it in a healthy and safe way. We can also offer educative sessions for parents. Now, these are not therapy sessions, but they are delivered therapeutically. They are educative in the sense that we're looking at the impact of sexual abuse on a child's developing brain and how that might change behaviours and presentation, and supporting parents in coping with that. In addition to what's listed on here, we can also support families and their workers with family day assessments. We complete AIM3 assessments because we're all AIM3 trained, and we can support AIM3 assessments as well. So it says on there, call us to discuss a referral. We would always welcome that before any referral is submitted. So again, it's back to that number 01642 300 774. Okay, so I've split the topics for this presentation. There are so many intertwining connections between child sexual abuse and harmful sexual behaviour, but for the purpose of this workshop, for you to understand the definitions, the scale, the impact, and to look at some of the resources that are separate, I've split the two. So I have gathered some of these infographics from the CSA Centre of Expertise. And I'll talk a lot about this particular group of professionals. They have a website. If you Google CSA Centre of Expertise, there's lots of resources on there, lots of information about child sexual abuse. Barnardo's is integral to that group of professionals, so we feed into the information as well. The infographics are based on data that's collected on a yearly basis. So this is last year's data. And what we do know about data is that it kind of tells us what we sort of know. What we also know about child sexual abuse is that it thrives in secrecy. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that we're just looking at the tip of the iceberg. What we do know is that the figures and the percentages and the data I'm going to present you is just the beginning of what we kind of are finding out. So in terms of how children are victims of sexual abuse and sexual offences, children are disproportionately likely to be victims of sexual offences. The infograph clearly shows they are the victims in 40% of sexual offences, and yet they make up only 20% of the population. By means of their age, their cognitive ability, their physical size, they are vulnerable to sexual offences disproportionately as members of the society that we live in. So again, think bigger than what the stats actually show us, but even as kind of information that we've got our fingertips on, it's pretty shocking. So have some time, you know, if you need to pause this slide to kind of reflect and think, check out whether you feel at all surprised at any of these figures. this kind of gives us a flavour of the scale and nature of child sexual abuse. So let's have a think about gender, and for the purpose of the CSA data collection, they have split gender into girls and young women, boys and young men. Okay, so this is the data that they've got. 15% of girls and young women are estimated to experience some form of sexual abuse before the age of 16, 5% of boys and young men. What I would say is that this data is reflective of access to services, ability to disclose, and ability to come to the attention of services, not necessarily the experience of sexual abuse. From my work in this field for many, many years, it's my understanding that it is more of a equal split across all genders. And for some genders, it is harder to come to the attention of services, to access services, and also for them to disclose. So in this data, we've got boys and young men at 5%. What we do know is that boys and young men face so many difficulties in accessing services and coming to the attention of services. So a lot of our referrals for support will come through criminal justice processes. Children who identify as boys or young men will often come to the attention of services because of criminal acts. Prior to getting the support that they need for healing or behaviours that have been presenting. If you have a look at Lads Like Us, so this is a couple of guys from Manchester called Danny and Mike. They have a website and they do a lot of conferences and talks, and when I've presented to North Yorkshire colleagues before, some of you have had the privilege of seeing them in sort of face-to-face events. Danny and Mike talk extensively about their own experience of child sexual abuse as children. They're now adults, and they talk about the difficulties as boys and young men that they faced in accessing services, the barriers that they faced. So it's really important to kind of look at these stats, like I said, and just think of them as the tip of the iceberg. In terms of who has harmed a child, the data from the CSA Centre of Expertise suggests that the most serious and repeated offences are more likely to be committed by known persons. Now, I'm of a certain age where I grew up in the world of stranger danger. What we do know is that most of the children that we're working with here at Barnardo's have been harmed by people that they know, people that they trust, people who have been able to be in a position to exert power and control and exploit the children that they have harmed. So for boys and young men, the stats show that it's often a figure in authority. So we're, sports leaders, church leaders, youth group leaders. One of my roles with Barnardo's a few years ago was to complete safeguarding audits of Premier League football clubs. And one of the things that we were asked to support the clubs with was the fine line that they saw between children who were desperate to achieve status in the team and be picked for the first team. That fine line for them between that loyalty to the club and that desperate need to be seen and as a football player, and kind of disregarding how they were being treated. Now, not necessarily sexual abuse or any form of abuse, but kind of really sort of having their sights set on impressing somebody. So you can see that children are vulnerable to positions of power. Children are vulnerable to people in what they see as authority. For girls, the abuse by a family member is seen to be more common. So when we're talking about family members, intrafamilial abuse is based on children's view of who is in their family. So it could be the trusted neighbour who doesn't need to knock when they come round, perhaps has a key to the house. It could be a babysitter that's regularly used. Family members are those wider members who have been the child's life and who seem part of the family. In terms of coming to the attention of authorities, 1 in 8 children, 1 in 8 victims come to the attention of the authorities at the time of the abuse. So for this stat, you know, when I said that we don't rely on verbal disclosure, it's really important that we as safe adults get better and better at enabling children to show us through their behaviours, for us to be curious, to be observant, so that children don't have to find the words, because often they don't have them. So let's get better at that. 1 in 8 victims coming to the attention of the authorities at the time of the abuse. In terms of ethnicity, the likelihood of experienced child sexual abuse does not vary significantly according to data. However, what we do know, and what I can tell you about our service, is that there are certain communities who face huge barriers in reporting abuse and accessing support. We are based in Middlesbrough, and our referral kind of demographic does not reflect the demographic of the locality, and never has done. And we've worked tirelessly to try and overcome this, really trying to reach out to different communities. But there are some real difficulties for some children and families in certain communities to access support. Okay, so in terms of signs that a child is being sexually abused, I'm not talking about us taking responsibility from, you know, not putting that responsibility on the child. So how do we do that? So these are some of the key signs that a child might be sexually abused, but they can also demonstrate other concerns, and I get that. But there's a brilliant toolkit just been recently developed by the Child Sexual Abuse Centre of Expertise, so CSA Centre of Expertise that I referred to earlier. They have developed a toolkit that is to enable practitioners, professionals, anybody working with children who has a duty of care, and we all do, don't we? Every member of the community does. But this particular toolkit is like building a picture of a child if we've got the slightest concern. So if you have a look at the CSA Centre of Expertise, the toolkit for spotting signs that a child might be sexually abused, if we get used to using that, used to looking at that, having those courageous conversations with colleagues, curious conversations with each other, exploring what our thoughts and feelings are, if we have those skills, then we can actually change that number in the previous slide. We can have children coming to our attention without relying on them to tell us what's happening, because like I said, a lot of them won't have the ability, the cognitive language. So let's have a look at this. Changes in behaviour. A child might start becoming aggressive, withdrawn, clingy. They might have difficulties sleeping. They might have regular nightmares. And this is a change for them. So we're noticing changes, or we're hearing about changes. Every behaviour is communication. So they might start wetting the bed. What we do know here in our service is that toileting is massively related to, or changes in toileting is massively related to signs that a child has been harmed. They might start avoiding the abuser. So they might develop a dislike for a certain person. They might develop a slight fear, or you might see a fear when a certain person is coming in or close to them. Opposite to that, the child may well have been coerced, manipulated so powerfully by somebody who wants to harm them that actually they feel a sense of loyalty, so they're drawn to them. So we've got avoiding the abuser, but for some children it might be that you've seen a sudden change, that they're actually drawn to somebody that they haven't been before. Could be sexually inappropriate behaviour, and we're going to look at that in a second in terms of how do we develop an understanding of sexual development. How do we correlate sexual development with child development and know when something is a little bit off? Because we've all grown up in different households and we've all had different experiences, but there are some behaviours and some language uses that will be out of sync with child development, healthy child development, and we need to be aware of that as professionals and practitioners working with children. Physical problems. For a lot of the children that we work with here, children hold their trauma somatically, so they hold it in the body. There's a whole book, well, there's a whole range of books actually, but there's a brilliant book called The Body Holds the Score, The Body Keeps the Score, sorry, by Bessel van der Kolk. And he talks about how if we have a trauma that we cannot verbalize, it will stay in our body, and it will be stuck in our body as pain, as aches. I'm really lucky that I have a movement psychotherapist on my team, and she works really well with children who cannot verbalize what's happened but need to move the pain. So you might see children with unexplained tummy aches. And obviously we have the second brain in our tummy and we hold all our emotions there. You might see children who perhaps, this is linked again to the toileting. It could be that they have certain soreness in areas that are specifically related to abuse. But don't overlook the physical problems that have no kind of medical explanation, because that could be the trauma being held by the child. There may well be problems at school. Now, I used to be a primary school teacher, and I look back at the days when there were certain children who would want to stay in at playtime, be close to me. I was their trusted adult. They wanted to stay back after school. They wanted to help to tidy up. They didn't want to go home. So problems at school doesn't necessarily mean disruptive, aggressive. It can mean that they see school as their safe place and they actually don't want to go home. Or it could be that they don't want to go to school and be seen, or have the likelihood of somebody picking up on clues. And the last one is that children sometimes try and give us clues. Like I said, cognitively, they may well not have the ability to put into words what has happened to them, but they might try and give clues. There's a brilliant iPlayer documentary that is still available called Poppy's Story. And Poppy is, I think she's about 19 now, but when she was 18, she waived her right to anonymity, and she chose to tell her story of child sexual abuse. She was harmed by her paternal grandfather, and he lived in the basement of their family home. So he was right underneath them all the time she was growing up. At age 5, she recalls in the documentary thinking that she'd told her mum what was happening. He was harming her almost on a daily basis, sexually abusing her, and she thought she told her mum. Her mum recalls this moment as well. And actually what did happen was that Poppy said a couple of words and then giggled and then kind of retracted and was withdrawn. But in her mind as a 5-year-old, she thought she'd told her mum. And because her mum didn't quite understand what she was saying, we're not blaming mum, she's not blaming mum, it was the situation of this child not being able to verbalize. And why would she? It's not part of her healthy development. It's not part of her language. But she recalls giving clues. Mum recalls this strange moment. But Poppy thought that she'd told mum, and Poppy thought that mum's reaction was acceptance, validation that this is what happened in all families. So Poppy didn't say anything else until she was about 13 or 14, and she cognitively understood that this actually wasn't okay. And she was able to find the words to say what was happening to her. Poppy and her mum have worked alongside other organisations to really raise the profile of child sexual abuse and support anybody, any safe adult, to kind of spot the signs. So it's worth a watch if you have the time and you're interested. Okay, so a little activity for you to kind of ponder on. I've mentioned how understanding child development and healthy sexual development helps us identify signs of sexual abuse. Children's sexual development is shaped by their environments, by their experiences, what they see. So this is why atypical sexual behaviour and sexual preoccupations in childhood may indicate traumatic sexualization through sexual abuse. So we need to get better at having curiosity around what a child is doing, what a child is saying, and how this might be out of sync with their healthy child development. So these scenarios are from the Brook traffic light toolkit, and we use these, only certain ones, and we tweak them sometimes, but we use these with some children, to help them understand kind of what's okay, or get an understanding of what they think is okay or not okay, and then develop an understanding of what is okay, and body boundaries and their sense of body boundaries. We also use them with parents in our educative sessions, and we use them with colleagues to have those open discussions, because we all come with our own kind of template, our own frame of reference of, sex education, sexual development, and kind of where it all fits with healthy and safe. So let's have a little think of these. So in terms of the Brook traffic light system, it comes up with green, yeah, that's in line with healthy child development. Amber, I have some concerns. There's something there that I would like to know a little bit more about. It feels out of line with healthy child development. Red is a huge red flag. This is really, really concerning. This is quite obviously out of sync with the healthy child development. So first of all, we've got Amy. So Amy is age 5 and asks her classmates if they want to have sex with her. Pause the presentation if you need to, and just have a little think about whether that would be green. Yeah, that's kind of healthy curiosity. Whether it would be amber, I'm a bit concerned about that. Or whether it would be red, that is massively out of line with what I would expect for her child development. We've also got Anishka. So Anishka is age 4 and attempts to touch her brother's penis and asks, what is that? Again, pause the presentation if you need to and have a little think about whether you think this would be green, amber or red. Let's have a look back at Amy. So Brook have actually categorized this as amber, and their justification or their rationale is that there is potential concern about how Amy has learnt and is using adult language. And this concerns me as well, because, where has she heard it from? Where has she picked up this language? And has somebody said it to her? Has somebody encouraged her to say it to others? Her behaviour is affecting other children. So we're not going straight to red flag at this point, because actually she's only 5. We wouldn't expect this. Yeah, we've got some concerns, but actually let's have a little dig, have a bit of curiosity about kind of where she got this language from. Because she's using it correctly in grammatical terms. She's saying, do they want to have sex with her? So where has she heard that from? So they're saying that is amber. Anishka, they're placing Anishka's behaviour at green, given the information that we've got. So what they're saying is that it reflects natural curiosity and that it reflects healthy development for the age group. So in this isolated instance, this would remain at green. If we learnt that this was a daily occurrence, that she's trying to touch her brother, if we learnt that her brother had encouraged her to have a look, then, because the image and the size of the character suggests that the brother is older. Maybe I'm making an assumption, but if he has asked her to have a look at it, then that's worrying. Some people might consider the fact that, he's naked and she seems to be clothed. What's that about? He's getting dressed, potentially. But given the information we've got, this is green. Given the information we had about Amy, it's amber, because of the effect that it's having on other children and the fact that we don't know where she's got that language from. Okay, so all the time we're thinking about sexual development from 0, okay, in the same way that we would consider child development holistically from 0. So these next two, we've got Simon, who is age 9. He exposes his genitals in the local park with the intention of being seen by passers-by. Do we think that this is green? It's okay, it's natural behaviour, it's in line with child development. Amber or red? And what we might start to consider here is contextual safeguarding because of the location. And that is, really quite important. As opposed to Jennifer, who's age 9, she's alone in the family bathroom touching her genitals. So she's in a private space. So again, contextual safeguarding, do we think green, amber or red? So in terms of Brook have said that Simon's behaviour is placed in the red category. And their reasons for this are that it's not consensual for all people involved. It's occurring in a public space, so we've got that element of contextual safeguarding, and it could make him vulnerable by attracting the attention of others. What we also don't know is, has Simon been coerced to do this? And like I said before, every behaviour meets a need. What need is this meeting for Simon, and what support does he need because of it? For Jennifer, Brooke have placed this behaviour in green. They feel that it's safe and healthy, and it's taking place in a private space. Now, given the work that I do, I would want to know a little bit more just to ensure that it remains in green, because I would want to know, is she touching herself because she's sore? Is she touching herself because she has been coerced or encouraged to do that? Is there a video somewhere in that bathroom? She is alone, but there could be technology that has been set up to observe her, and she's been directed to go somewhere private so that that can be facilitated. However, given the information that we've got here, it's placed as green. So 9, she could be entering puberty, she could have started her periods, she could be starting to explore her body for pleasure, all of which are natural and healthy in child development and sexual development in line together. So we would just maybe want to be curious about, is she in discomfort, is she in pain? But if she's enjoying feeling her body, getting to know her body, it's a brilliant start to her understanding what she does like, what she doesn't like, where she's happy to touch herself, and where her body boundaries start and end. So as it is, healthy development. Okay, so some resources now that I'm going to direct you to that are super supportive in the work that you might be doing. It can support you as a professional practitioner, but it also can support the people that you're working with. So first off, we've got Nina Burrows. She's a psychologist working in the field of sexual abuse. She has publications, but also a series of YouTube videos about sexual abuse. And these are families who just need to have a conversation around bringing, if sexual abuse has occurred in the family, sexual abuse thrives in secrecy, and sometimes we facilitate or continue that secrecy by not talking about it, not talking about the impact. Nina supports families in bringing that topic out into the open in a safe, unharmful way. So the Survivors Trust, many of you may have heard of the Survivors Trust. It's a national organisation. It's an umbrella agency essentially for over 135 specialist rape, sexual violence and child sexual abuse organisations across the UK and Ireland. As a central source, it'll at the very least give you guidance as to what is in your locality and what services are provided, but also as a central source, it gives resources, a helpline and an overview of kind of professional support, but also family support. Similarly, NAPAC. So NAPAC is the National Association for People Abused in Childhood. It's a website, it's got a free helpline for survivors of sexual abuse. They have very few services across the country, but those that they do have resources and support that they can provide. So 1 in 4 is the estimate of people who may well have been impacted by child sexual abuse. They offer support services through counselling, groups, advocacy, and they also have some practical exercises on the website that might be useful in a kind of CBT way for survivors. Excuse me. The Survivors UK is a website for men, boys and non-binary people affected by sexual violence. Again, national website. There are some helplines on there and lots of resources worth a look. 1 in 6 is specifically for male survivors of sexual abuse. Again, the 1 in 6 is the estimate of how many males are or have been affected, but what we do know about stats is that it's probably more than that. But again, a national helpline, information, support, And the survivor stories, that's really interesting and very, very important. A lot of children and families that we support feel strength from the idea that they are not the only ones. The level of shame, the level of blame, the level of isolation that comes with sexual abuse because it's shrouded in secrecy is lifted when people feel kind of that they're not the only ones. They understand that, you know, this does happen to other people, and that can help. Okay, so websites for parents, some amazing resources and tools under the Lucy Faithfull Foundation. So the Lucy Faithfull Foundation have a few websites underneath them, if you like. Parents Protect being one of them. I'm going to show you a video shortly from there. Lots of digital downloads on Parents Protect, also safety planning templates. Just the other day I used the digital safety plan with a family, and it enabled a lot of really helpful discussions and decisions around kind of device use across the family, and healthy modelling of behaviour. Stop It Now is specifically for older young people and adults who have worrying thoughts and feelings about sexual harm, but it's also for people who are concerned about another person's thoughts and feelings about sexual harm. Excuse me. Upstream is the Scottish version of it. So just because it's based in Scotland doesn't mean we can't look at it or use it. There's a lot of, although it's the same thing, there's a lot of useful resources on the Upstream site that aren't on the Stop It Now site, so still worth a look. Okay, you may well be well aware of the PANTS rule and the NSPCC support for professionals, parents alike. Lots of resources on their website. And the PANTS rule, I know that there's been a real kind of push recently in schools in the Teesside area for presentations from the NSPCC, and it kind of reinforces that idea of children are in charge of their own bodies. No longer do we, you know, should we or do we encourage little Billy to kiss Auntie Mary. It's little Billy's choice. Okay, so it's about kind of what am I okay with? You know, I have rights as a child and I have my own body boundaries. Okay, lastly, we've got We Stand, which used to be MOSAC. It's a national organisation. They offer a range of support services and information for families affected by child sexual abuse. So they support, if there's been a parent or somebody within the family who has harmed a child, We Stand support the non-abusing parent. Again, we've had parents who have accessed the national helpline and got a lot of support from that website. Keep Kids Safe is a similar website for families, parents in particular, to explore sort of the impact of sexual abuse within the family and how to keep safe in the new normal. Okay. So it's probably a good time to have a little break, maybe have a snack or a drink or a loo break. That's the joy of a recorded session. But I'm now going to go into the harmful sexual behaviour section. I do need to come out of the PowerPoint to show you a film because it's based on Parents Protect, and try as I might, I can't embed it in the PowerPoint. But like I said, Parents Protect is part of the Lucy Faithfull group. And this film highlights the need for our awareness of trauma-informed language, our awareness of harmful sexual behaviour, meeting a need, and thinking about how we might meet that need in a safe and healthy way, how we might support that child. So please do look out for and listen out for the language that might surprise you positively in this video. So I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint and share the video. Okay. So it's only giving me the option to share a whiteboard with you. Let's have a little look down here. I can't see my video. Maybe it'll let me share the video. Aha, there we go. Share. Okay. I'm hoping that you can hear this. Simone, could you come off mute and let me know if you can see young people with
will.
Can you see it?
I can see it, yeah.
Okay, let's see if we can hear it.
Young people with harmful sexual behaviour. Around 1/3 of child sexual abuse is committed by other children and young people under the age of 18. That said, the circumstances are often very different from when adults abuse, meaning they often require a different response. But that does not mean that we should not take such abuse seriously, because we absolutely should. The harm done to victims can be just as grave as when the abuse is by an adult. In such circumstances, instead of talking about the abuser, we often use the term young person who has exhibited harmful sexual behaviour. As children themselves, they have the right to be protected and supported to lead better lives. We must not ignore the risks they may continue to pose, but we must also recognise that with the right help, the vast majority will not re-offend.
If you discover that your child has harmed another child, it's likely that you'll feel shocked, confused, and unsure about where to turn to for help. We find that parents want to do the right thing, and they also want to protect their son or daughter. Sometimes parents struggle to identify normal sexual behaviour in young people, and the circumstances of young people who exhibit harmful sexual behaviour vary. For example, using inappropriate language to the abuse of a sibling over a long period of time. Parents often want to know why. It's often not the result of one single thing, and it's likely the child won't be able to say why. Rather than punishing and shaming young people, we believe in helping them connect with their strengths and positive attributes to draw them away from behaving in a way that harms others. The online world presents another challenge. Today, most children and young people experience their sexual development in a completely different way to their parents, which can make talking about sex more difficult. Almost all go online, and many are exposed to pornography before they even reach puberty. As adults, we have a responsibility to do everything we can to prevent children and young people absorbing harmful material they find online. We need to give them positive and accurate messages about the law, sexuality, sex, and relationships. We want them to understand the importance of kindness, respect, love, intimacy, and consent.
So there's the Parents Protect helpline, and then obviously the Stop It Now link. Okay, let's stop sharing that. Go back into. Okay, let's pop the PowerPoint back on. So hopefully, when you were watching or listening to the video, there were certain words that kind of jumped out to you that really kind of highlighted the trauma-informed importance of thinking about not using criminality in our language. So previously, many years ago, we would talk about victim and perpetrator. Even when we were talking about children, we would not use that information, that language now. So you heard on the video that the terms the child that has harmed and the child that has been harmed is much more trauma-informed, but also there's a sense that actually even in the harming, there will be a need, and there will be a need for support. So the harming demonstrates a need. Okay. So in terms of definitions, this NSPCC definition is widely used, and it actually comes from Simon Hackett, who I know North Yorkshire colleagues are fully aware of in terms of his continuum. I'm going to have a little look at that in a second as well, but I know that he's updating it, but the definition stands, and this is the one that we would refer to as well. So I'm going to show you a model here that we use in Barnardo's to kind of consider what the contributing factors might be to harmful sexual behaviour. But as a summary, in a nutshell, every element of contributing factors to harmful sexual behaviour is rooted in connection seeking. So attachment is at the base of every need, and an unmet need can be can lead to behaviours to seek that need being met in an unhealthy and unsafe way. So if we know that secure attachments are linked to the development of emotional and behavioural self-regulation, then the presence of attachment insecurity can be seen as a key risk factor in the development of dysregulated and harmful sexual behaviour. So if we have a look at this lower kind of line, or this foundation, if you like, on the model, we've got the elements of trauma and abuse, family dynamics, disorganized attachment, and social discourse. It could be that a child has experienced all or a combination or just one of those elements, and that has developed a need, a connection seeking need in that child. In terms of trauma and abuse, long gone is the myth that children who have been sexually abused go on to sexually harm other children. Okay, there are some children who may have experienced child sexual abuse, who haven't had support, opportunity to heal, they haven't had access to therapies, and that may develop into harmful sexual behaviour or connection seeking in an unhealthy way. But by no means is it a trajectory, okay? But for some children, if they haven't had trauma and abuse resolved, or they haven't had the opportunity to access support, then potentially it could be a contributing factor. Family dynamics. For some children, it may be that there's a golden child, and so they have a sense of grandiose, they have a sense of entitlement and lack of understanding of body boundaries, lack of understanding of people's choice in whether they engage in a conversation, engage in touch. So connection seeking with somebody who has a sense of grandiose or has a kind of sense of entitlement comes from a position of, I am entitled to this, I have the power for this, I've been brought up in my childhood to believe that I can have and do what I want. So the family dynamics has contributed to that behaviour. Family dynamics could also be a child that's been scapegoated or isolated. So the connection seeking stems from needing some kind of emotional response to their presence, needing a sense of belonging. Disorganized attachment could be a contributing factor because a child has had no sense of, will people be there permanently? So in order to seek a connection, in order to attach to somebody, it could be that, you know, that there's a distrust, there's a disloyal, there's a sense of disloyalty, and they just don't know what the template of a healthy relationship looks like. Social discourse. So for many of our children, the influence of peers, wanting a sense of belonging with a certain group, having approval from a certain group, community, or influencer. So we've got the likes of Andrew Tate on Instagram, who children are being fed information about, again, what they should be entitled to, what they should expect in relationships, in friendships. You have any of those in the mix with emerging sexuality. Emerging sexuality brings about chemical changes, confusion, lack of self-esteem, lack of confidence, all of those things in a natural, healthy, developing child. Emerging sexuality creates vulnerability in itself. But if you've got that underlying element of any or all of those factors, you've got kind of a really, really dangerous mix that would then potentially lead to either or emotional sexual stimulation or sensory sexual stimulation. So emotional sensory stimulation would be a child who just needs to feel a sense of belonging, needs to feel a psychological sense of love, connection, but doesn't have that healthy template on how to get that. The sensory sexual stimulation will be a child who literally needs the physical touch that gives them the sexual stimulation, and they will reach out for that and try and connect with others in an unhealthy and unsafe way to get that, because that's what their need is for attachment. So all of that in the mix, harmful sexual behavior. What we're not working with are children who are mini sex offenders, who are paedophiles in the making. We're working with children who have a need for connection, and for whatever reason, contributing factors have led to that child needing the connection and trying to get it in an unsafe, unhealthy way. So a lot of our work is about helping them meet that need in a safe and healthy way. Okay, so this is a quite an old model, 1986, but it's really, really useful and helpful. So it was developed by Finkelhor through his work in American prisons with adult sex offenders. But it really is a simple way of understanding how thoughts become behaviors, and it really helps our children to understand, okay, so how did a thought end up into an action? How can we go back to that thought and really help you make positive changes, meeting your needs in healthy, safe ways? So the Finkelhor model is 4 preconditions from thought to behavior. And it helps the children understand, because initially everybody has a motivation, everybody has a thought about something, but in terms of the Finkelhor model, there's a motivation, a strong wanting to. For our children, it's a strong wanting to connect. But their template for connecting is unhealthy and unsafe. So they have internal inhibitors that they remove through giving themselves permission, using their consciousness, their conscience, to kind of think, well, actually, this is okay for me to have these thoughts. So they start to give themselves permission. And we really work hard with the children to kind of understand where this comes from, removing any blame or shame, because what we don't want to do is shut them down. We want to enable them to trust us and to not feel judged. What then happens is that children, and adults, once they give themselves permission, they see permission in others. So they remove those external inhibitors by thinking that others have created an opportunity, or that others believe that what they're doing or thinking is okay. And then the final stage, in Finkelhor's model, it's called overcoming victim resistance, but simply put, it's doing something harmful and getting away with it. That compounds that sense of, this was okay to think because I've done it and I've got away with it. And then it goes back to the thoughts again, and it's a whole process again. So we work through this with children, age appropriate, obviously, but we look at and help children understand a sense of denial, a sense of excuse, understanding why their behavior has been seen as wrong, inappropriate, dangerous, but also enabling them to pinpoint the moment that those thoughts became permission giving, became opportunity creating, became actions. Okay. So you are familiar with the Hackett continuum, and Simon Hackett is updating this as we speak. But I wanted to share with you, just so that you got an idea of the threshold of work that we do here at Barnardo's. We would always expect harmful sexual behaviour referrals to come from a social worker, because we would always expect the level of complexity to sit with social care, because we are working with children whose behaviours sit at the top end of problematic, dipping into abusive and violent. Sadly, what a lot of inquiries that we're getting more recently are coming from schools, parents, early help, who are at a loss as how to get support for certain children. And when we have a discussion, this is why that phone call is so important. When we have a discussion, it transpires that the behaviours that they're observing, that they're curious about, are actually sitting at the threshold of our service, top end of problematic, abusive and violent. And as such, they really should be sitting with social care. So another tool that is really helpful, along with the Hackett continuum, is a Belgian tool called Sensor. So this is this is almost I feel like it's a combination of contextual safeguarding, Hackett Continuum, and the Brook traffic light system. So Censor have this grid where they take into account consent, but was it mutually consensual? They take into account consent. They take into account voluntary engagement. So they're really thinking about, okay, so you feel or you say you consented, but did you engage voluntarily? Could you have said no? Was it such that you consented because you were under such coercion or you were under such influence by this person that you believed that you had to say yes? It looks at equality, so power imbalances. It looks at that appropriateness in a child's age and development. It looks at the contextual safeguarding. The last element, called Impact 4, is really interesting because that looks at the impact on the child's kind of reputation, the impact within school, the community, the, you know, wherever, the family. And that's really key, particularly when we have some people who may well want to put something on social media, may well want to establish some kind of vigilante response, and helpful response within the community or the school. The impact consideration really helps us kind of think, how can we best safeguard this child and their family? Okay, I mentioned the Good Lives model earlier, and there's a brilliant video on this website that explains it to professionals and children alike. But the Shaw website is like the child and young person's version of the Stop It Now. It's a safe space for teenagers worried about sexual behaviour, worried about theirs, worried about their thoughts, their feelings, their behaviours, but also if they're worried about others. But primarily it's to support children and young people who have thoughts and feelings and just don't know where to go for that support, that initial place. Some really good videos on there, resources on there for you and children that you support. If you're not familiar with the contextual safeguarding website, I would encourage you to have a look at it. There's lots and lots of things on there that are really useful for all of the work that you do, but particularly for harmful sexual behaviour, there's the Beyond Referrals toolkit. This is aimed at schools, but I've used this to support workers in residential care homes with children. Basically, this tool can be applied to any setting where children gather, and it helps children feel empowered in protecting themselves and their friends, but it also supports us adults to really understand where children and why children might feel unsafe in a certain setting in relation to harmful sexual behaviour. It is brilliant. Okay, just a reminder of who I am. It says questions, but I'm not going to be able to answer them in real time because this is a recording. However, if you want to ask me a question, please do drop me an email, please do give me a call. And like I say, we're based in Middlesbrough, but we are flexible and creative enough to support your work across North Yorkshire. And I really hope this has been helpful and supportive for you.
Before you stop, Claire, I just want to say a big thank you for the workshop. I'm sure people will find it very, very helpful. And just to echo the point that you made at the beginning, that it is part of our toolkit in North Yorkshire. So we will be putting all those resources on the North Yorkshire Safeguarding Children's Board website and also on the North Yorkshire Early Help landing page in NYES as well. So there'll be lots of resources to support people having those curious conversations and being clear about where to refer families on to. So thank you, Claire, it's really good.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for your time and your commitment to keeping children safe. I look forward to having some curious conversations with North Yorkshire colleagues. Thanks, everybody.